Alright, so we actually got some really cool new interesting insights in regards to Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, which is coming out very soon, next month. And this is coming to us from the PlayStation blog. Now what's really cool about this interview in particular is that it's a dual interview. So they're interviewing Yoshinori Kitase as well as Mariko Sato, who are working on Crisis Core, but they also talk to the developers of Tactics Ogre Reborn. And this is cool because both of those games got their start on the PSP, and now it's a full circle moment where they're both coming back with remasters. But for the purposes of my channel, we'll only be covering the Crisis Core stuff, but I'll leave a link in the description if you're curious to read the whole thing. So starting off with that first question, PlayStation basically asks about the anticipation level of bringing both of these games back in a remastered format, but why do it now? Kitase says if a game's original hardware is no longer manufactured, it can be difficult to play the title. Crisis Core is an example of that. Of course, it would be possible to use cloud technology to play the game at its original specs, but the truth is that after FF7 Remake, fans have higher expectations towards the graphics. So I think that it's definitely worthwhile remastering the game for current generation platforms in order to meet those expectations, which is true. You could easily go online right now and download an emulated version of Crisis Core and play that. It'll look great, it'll sound great. It might not play great because the game hasn't aged well in terms of its controls, but for a lot of people, they don't want to go through the trouble of trying to emulate this game. And the idea that they could have just done a cloud version would have felt really just kind of half-hearted. Cloud stuff is not really where it needs to be. If you don't have a great internet connection, then that experience is going to suffer because of it. So the fact that they actually decided to put a lot of thought and effort into what they were going to do with Crisis Core and actually bring it back in a proper way is really reassuring to me. PlayStation also asks about any fond memories that they might have working on the original games, and this is something I didn't know, but Kitase says that in the original Crisis Core he was an executive director for the game, but because they didn't have enough game designers back then, he actually had to join the game development team partway through the cycle to help them out. And he was in charge of several sections that came from the original game, so he did a lot of the Shinra Mansion level design, staging the confrontation between Cloud and Sephiroth at the Nibelheim reactor. Sato goes on to say, I didn't work on the original Crisis Core, but I definitely played it when it came out. At the time, I vaguely remembered Zack as a character who only had a brief appearance in FF7, but I was so surprised at the emotional reaction I had to his story, which is true. There are tons of people who play through Final Fantasy VII and they don't even know who Zack is. They see this guy who looks like Cloud, but he's got black hair and he's got more hair, and they're like, who the heck is this guy? And then it pretty much ends at that. So for a lot of people, even to this day, they're not familiar with Zack, so this is going to be a brand new, fresh experience, especially for those who didn't experience the original Crisis Core. PlayStation says both of these remasters add lots of improvements and new features. How did you decide what to add to the game? Sato says for Crisis Core, we discussed the direction we wanted to take the remastered version in with creative director Tetsuya Nomura. The development studio, I believe it's pronounced Toze, also made proposals for enhancements, and from there, we decided what to go with. PlayStation says, what was the most challenging thing about adding these new features? Sato says there were many challenges, but adjusting the visuals was many of the biggest. We originally considered porting the graphics unchanged, but there were a lot of things that we were concerned about when we first brought the original version onto a large screen. We ultimately decided that we wanted to create a similar impression to the graphics from 7 Remake. However, there were some things that just didn't work well when we just swapped out the 3D models. So we spent many long days altering and adjusting things. Which is true, trying to take an OG game and blowing it up on a larger screen, things just do not look the same. And the fact that they, again, are taking into account what fan expectations are, especially graphically, is also, again, I'm going to say this a lot, it's very reassuring because the team putting Crisis Core together as well as the 7 Remake trilogy, they clearly understand this is very important to a lot of people. They cannot afford to screw it up. And there was a lot of people who were dissatisfied with the original compilation of Final Fantasy VII. So for them to put much more love and care into these games to make sure it's done right, again, very reassuring. I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Kitase adds, the PSP used the same graphics tech as the PS2 generation, so there's a gap of 3 generations here. Crisis Core FF7 Reunion has achieved a graphical quality close to 7 Remake, which makes it feel like a new, fresher, and more exciting game to play. Which is true. Something as simple as a new coat of paint for Crisis Core can make it feel like a brand new game and a brand new experience. Sato adds, we also felt that the original Crisis Core battle system felt a bit difficult to play in some places, especially when compared to recent games that have action-based battles. We re-examined all the areas that people considered hard to play in the original and implemented various ideas to improve them. A long period of tweaking and polishing was needed here too, to ensure that the game was more playable, but kept what made the original great. Thinking back on it, we really did some serious fine-tuning on the game, which is kind of funny because months ago, Nomura and Kitase and Sato did an interview. I forget the publication, but I did cover it on my channel. And when asked about the OG's combat, Sato was pretty blunt. She was just straight up like, look, the game was fine back in the day, but trying to play it now, it's not happening, sister. It's not gonna work. We really gotta fine tune and change this. So based on people's reactions to the TGS demo, it sounds like it's gonna play very closely to 7 Remake, which is great because OG Crisis Core at the time was serviceable, but trying to play it nowadays, there's that weird delay between actions with Zack, and combat is not as satisfying as it should be, and the combat in 7 Remake was. That was a battle system I will never ever get tired of, so anything that's, kind of close to that in Crisis Core is great to me. Sato says, I can only talk from personal experience, but the specs of the current generation of platforms have improved a lot over what went before, which makes it possible to depict many different things, not just with the graphics, but in lots of ways. That naturally makes you want to push the development as far as it will go and add everything you can think of. She then goes on to talk more about mobile platforms and developing games for those, and how they're convenient because you can pretty much play them anywhere, but your options as a developer are kind of limited because you're working with smartphone hardware, which is true. Smartphones have come a long way, but comparing a current smartphone to the power of a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X and S is going to probably be night and day when it comes to gaming, and we're seeing that with Crisis Core. So the fact that they have way more tools at their disposal now to really fine-tune this game and make sure it looks and sounds and plays as good as it can, and it doesn't just look and feel like a mobile port, again, I'm just completely put at ease with these developer interviews that come out for Crisis Core and 7 Rebirth. PlayStation also goes on to talk about how fans' expectations could potentially impact the game during its development cycle. Sato says, indeed, the project team knew that it was quite a popular title from the beginning of development. We saw how lots of fans would post about Crisis Core on the anniversary of its release date each year, i.e. see Twitter. There was a little pressure from that, but the whole team really threw themselves into the development, so we're eager to show the results to everyone now. It was genuinely thanks to all the kind words from the fans that we were able to work so hard on this new version. Incidentally, the way everyone called out Gungaga when we revealed the game made me feel really glad after all of our efforts, which that's become a huge meme in and of itself, is Zack just saying Gungaga. Why? I don't know, but it's happening. And then finally they say, what would you like to say to any people picking up Crisis Core FF7 Reunion? Sato says Crisis Core has been made so that players of the PSP original can enjoy a nostalgic but also fresh and different experience. I would recommend giving it a try. Playing the game will also let you enjoy the original Final Fantasy VII, 7 Remake, as well as the upcoming 7 Rebirth on a deeper level too, which is pretty true. I'm very much excited to pick up and play Crisis Core. Now, I've speculated in the past, are they going to change anything? Is the ending going to be different? But I kind of feel like for a lot of people who haven't experienced Zack's story, they need to experience his original timeline. So I think maybe this will just be a faithful adaptation of Crisis Core. Everything's going to play out the same. The game is going to end, spoiler alert, with Zack's death, but maybe after the credits, to tie everything together with Remake and 7 Rebirth, maybe we get that end scene from 7 Remake where it's the new timeline where Zack doesn't die and things continue on from there. But for the most part, I think it's going to be pretty faithful. So I actually thought that was a really cool interview. It's kind of a longer video, so I apologize. I usually put out shorter content, so if you made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. Please leave any of your thoughts in the comments down below. What did you guys think of this interview? Are you as reassured about Crisis Core and the 7 Remake trilogy going forward as I am? It really feels like the devs know what they're doing this go around, and that they cannot screw this up, and that things have to be done the right way, whether it's the story, the writing, the gameplay. They're really putting in the extra effort to not half-ass anything this time around, and seeing how Crisis Core is turning out is very reassuring. So leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.